The time framework, I would like to give the floor also to the second speaker of today, who is Kateřina Kolářová, whom I would like to welcome and introduce. She is working at the Gender Studies Department of the Faculty of Humanities of Charles University. She dedicates her time to cultural studies, post-socialism, queer theories, feminism and disability studies. She is also interested in overlapping medicine and humanistic social sciences. This is all on my behalf, and I would like to give the floor to Kateřina Kolářová right now. Okay, I will set first of all my time. I would like to say thank you very much for an invitation, which I really appreciate. And I would like to apologize to the last panelists, as me and Hannah, we are giving lectures at the faculty in the afternoon. So unfortunately, we will not be able to stay here for the whole of your presentation. I would like to take you through my book, which I'm currently working on, which focuses on intersectioning of disabilities, feminist policies, how the concept of disabilities overlaps with race and other issues. At the very beginning, maybe I should mention that the major change or irritation which we will perceive is how we perceive internally the disability, handicaps. I would like to be a little bit more open on the perception of handicaps and disabilities. We shouldn't perceive it as a socially created hierarchy. You know, I'm writing the book in English, so I just try to focus on a couple of examples, which I'll try to translate into Czech. Maybe the translation be a little bit clumsy. I hope you, in case of the need of course, I would like to reword it. In 2009, roughly 20 years after the fall of the communism in the Czech Republic, Jan Potněšil has mentioned that in case I should decide between the government of communism and the possibility to walk, I would choose the wheelchair. That's unveiling that the discussions of post-socialism is playing an important role. The interview with Jan Potněšil shows us that the communist government was very much against the neoliberalist capitalism introduced in the Czech Republic. We could, together with Jose Munoz, talk about the crypto. What enables us to articulate the vision and imagines of politics. I also would like to draw attention to another quotation. What is the horizon of politics? I do use the definition of Deborah Gold, who defined it as an effective theory. When she was analyzing the activism, she asks a question: what factors do contribute to the fact that certain political acts and activisms are acceptable, imaginable, whilst others unacceptable, unthinkable? How opinions, what is politically viable, possible, or necessary, can have an impact on political activism. This is the framework of my work. Now I would like to choose the individual examples, how the political horizon, how the concepts of a disability and handicaps are reflected in political activism.
Začala nevím. A v té době, v roce 89, byl student, to znamená...
In 1989, he was a student, so he's probably around 50 years old now. We can talk about it later. Semantics in the disabilities and narratives of transformation. I'm coming back to Catherine Werder's work. Her book, What Was Social Mode, comes next. And a specific motto that opens the whole book. It is a short anecdote that has a great irony that shows the dominating logics of the historic moment. What is actually the definition of socialism? A moment of tension, the longest and most painful way from capitalism to capitalism. A route from capitalism to capitalism. Would you like a Czech variation of this cyclical thinking that says that nothing but a global capitalism is thinkable? If we are talking about a social, a human society, it's a study, sociological study of one Czech sociologist. It is perceived as an aberration or as something, as a deviation or something that does not belong here, that is a faulty line of the historical development. And one more example, Elaine Weiner, Market Dreams, one of the first gender analyses of the post-socialist development that shows and compares the binary logic of planned economy and market economy. And Czech translation, you can see the binary logic here, capitalism and success of capitalism. Is enough to measure the success of capitalism and failure of socialism, and the binary opposition that shows one part in the past. What is interesting is, and Weiner does not discuss, is to what extent this binary logic and the normativity of the binary exposition shows to what extent from the economic structures have become the criteria to evaluate society. You see the strong normativity here and unification of liberty and market economy that has survived until today. And now probably there's a second, even more important moment is showing to what extent the epistemology of socialism shows the inability. It shows socialism shows as immorality, irrationality. That's why semantics of inability is defined as necessity of socialism to fail. That is reflected to the semantic map that. The semantics of sickness and disability is a part of evaluation of post-socialist Czechoslovakia. Václav Havel said, our country does not thrive under the state socialism, we became sick morally. And former Prime Minister Petr Pidhar characterized communism as a health risk, and he blamed it for the loss of overall immunity of all inhabitants. And he called it as the most dangerous bomb in our bodies, in our organisms. That was a metaphor of HIV/AIDS, even though it is not mentioned here specifically. There are some intertextual connections here. This should illustrate not only to what extent the political ideas were shown. This worked as a this could be called a way to healing. The metaphor of the ticking bomb was used. And the last quote from Petr Pidhar, the way to healing will be very difficult. Each reform step will lead to our necessity to heal again. You probably are not surprised if you have heard the McLean's metaphor, even though McLean did not know the Czech context, and even though the post-socialist transformers from the 1990s did not know this book, the metaphors that McLean described, especially in relation to Latin America, appear also in Czechoslovakia. I apologize for speaking so fast.
Last example I would like to mention here in connection to the metaphor of incapability is my favorite quotation from Václav Klaus and his article, The Idea of Equality. It's something we hope for, but it's unacceptable. But here I would like to make a deviation and would like to consider the chimera idea. The definitions which I mention here and quote here are taken over from the Oxford Dictionary, but again, what really is mirrored here is the Foucault way of thinking. Chimera is abnormal, monstrous monster, combines two completely different features, and that is something which cannot survive. The fact we stopped the topic of a semantic map of a chimera actually shows what is hidden behind the wording of the text of Mr. Klaus, and that is the chimera, which is monstrous, which unites two completely different things and presents a threat to future life and is incompatible. So the statement of Václav Klaus is terminating his article, and that is the social care is less dangerous than unhuman communist and national socialistic experiments. This is an article from the year 1991, and I think it's worth to read it. Some of us could be definitely surprised. We were surprised in the same way by quite recent expressions. It's a metaphor which was still present during the course of the 90s, and in those days it served to legitimize the inequality as a natural part of unhealthy development of post-socialist, post-communist society. What I wanted to underline was to show that not only that the handicap, sickness was to a certain extent metaphor, which was supposed to have a moral appeal. I try to show what material impact it could have, but as a matter of course, I also wanted to stress the improperly articulated parts, the metaphors, which in the social post-social context is connected with recovery, close to the models of life, which are uncurable, which cannot fit into the metaphor of recovery, rehabilitation, and curing. Maybe I will jump directly to other examples I wanted to focus on, and that is the moment of chronicity. Before talking or going into the details, I would like to draw attention, maybe not. Now I would like to focus on one particular example, what impact the discourse of curability, capability has, which was framing actually the course of post-socialist transformation. It could be Requiem, which was not played. On the 1st of November 1984, there was a major fire of the institute where mentally retarded women were located. Maybe you have heard about it in Josef Klima's book, Brutality of the Power. Maybe you have noticed it in the movie of Philip Rench. Maybe it's definitely worth to look at it in more detail. I write about it in my book as well. It's definitely worthwhile to see how the movie of Philip Rench works as a sort of a memory of a socialist periods, of communist periods, how it recreates the event. Back in 2006, that is 22 years after the fire in the institute, mental hospital, there was a fire in Bohnice, again mental institute, where one woman has deceased in the fire. As for Věra Musilová, what she died in the net bed, it shows rather a wider context of biopolitics in curing and supporting people who are mentally retarded. Mentally retarded, I use this term due to the historical context, because it's the notion and the concept, the idea of being mentally retarded, which played an important role in the discourse about this particular occurrence, what actually influenced the death of Věra Musilová. I also use it because this term is still used by the experts and theoreticians. It happened dozens of years ago, but still I would like to draw your attention and would like to stress here the work of Mental Disability Center. They published a report on the net beds in mental hospitals, and I also mention reports from mental institutes and mental hospitals in the Czech Republic. The story of Věra Musilová and the story of 26 anonymous women who died in the fire back in Měděnec still points to the important points of the life of disabled people.
Dostala k tomu konceptu té nezměnitelnosti stavu.
And what I would like to show on this is the chronicity of mental retarded people, which actually define the horizon of living and non-living for Věra Musilová. I really would like to focus on one particular point, and that is the role which during the process at the court, which was launched by the mother of Věra Musilová.
Pardon, já jsem tady něco provedla. Tady vypadl jeden slide, který... Aha, pardon. Tak já se omlouvám tady...
I have to apologize. I can't switch on my presentation. Back to the discussion, which was launched by the judicial process, which was supposed to define whether the doctors made some mistake, and the carers in the institute made a mistake. Lege artis principle actually defines whether the support and care given to a particular person was sufficient given the circumstances. What the judicial process did not mention was what the concept or how the concept of lege artis is being influenced by the social concept and perception of good living, good life. Here I have a couple of studies which were published back in 2014. These actually prove that people who are defined as mentally retarded, mentally handicapped people, are intellectually handicapped, die much earlier than people without such a diagnosis, without a label of being mentally handicapped. In case of men, it's the difference of amounting to 13. In the case of women, it's the difference amounts to 20 years of life. The report, which was led by Pauline Haslop in Britain, states among the people with, who are intellectually handicapped are caused death which could be avoided in case we would be able to deliver proper health care. It's closely connected to complying with all the legislation, and quite frequently they are accommodated in very poor conditions, poor environment, and health caregivers do not listen properly to the requirements of mentally retarded. Věra Musilová opened a judicial process and wanted to receive at least an apology from the hospital or the institutes. This is the quotation of the apology Věra Musilová requested, or the mother of Věra Musilová requested or wanted to achieve during the judicial process. Jaroslava Musilová, the mother, she actually was pointing to the fact that her daughter was isolated, was netted in the bed. She was restricted as far as movement was concerned, and during the last couple of months of her life, she was actually jailed in her bed. During the judicial process, the court actually redefined the apology requested by the mother of Věra Musilová, reworded it, and what actually it proves from also another quotation from the ruling, that the net bed was not applied sufficiently in case of so serious handicap. They may put into threat not only themselves but also the others, and therefore they have to be limited as far as the freedom of movement is concerned.
I chose this example as to show you the possibility of healing and rehabilitation. One of these problems that this symbolics or rhetorics of ability or disability shows is when creating a political horizon of the post-socialist change and the normative direction is based on ideas of certain value that is assigned to the possibility to change of the society lagging behind Western societies. This showed zones of certain neglect where human lives fell. They could not be changed and improved. One of the examples was the mental retardation or the concept of thinking about the mental retardation. Another example, I probably won't be able to talk about, my time is almost up, is the maladjustment that we saw already in 1990s, not only since 2010. When I did the genealogy of this term, I came back to the 1990s. In 1997, the first year public notices already talked about the metaphor of maladjustment, and they worked with it the same way that this Czech society has worked with this term until after 2010. It is the metaphor of maladjustment. Of maladjusted worked as part of the socialist discourse. I would like to show you, tell you about the film The Way Out from 2014. Jeanette, the main character, a Roma young woman who is the main character in the film. She's a spouse, a mother, a daughter. She's in a very complex network of social relationships. The most interesting moment of the film is at the beginning when we see Jeanette and her mother she sees her mother who died when she was very young. She has some health problems. Then she goes see a doctor. The scene lasts about 3 minutes. We never see the doctor in it, and it is very well done. It shows the power inequality in the relationship of a doctor and a patient, a Roma patient. On top of that, when the doctor asks Jeanette how many miscarriages she had, about her family medical history, and it shows the multi-level consideration of the inability to change, and also the historical burden of being a Roma, and so the doctor shows the family medical history and shows that it will form the life of Jeanette and her opportunities to leave this burden. I would like to finish here by this concluding line: why this concept of chronicity or neglect or waiver is important to me. Talking about philosopher and anthropologist Elizabeth Povinelli, she examined the concept of neglect. She defined it as a basic concept of post-liberal societies. What is interesting about this concept of neglect, as Povinel defines it, is that she doesn't define it in contradiction to liberal societies' rights and inclusion. However, as its integral part, as an important part of society based nominally on principles of equality, inclusion, and acknowledgement of rights. The formulation that Povinelli formulates is, and as she says, each of us in our concept of happiness and our own prosperity to some extent is aware of certain zones of neglect and impossibility of prosperity in some areas. What I try to do is to examine the zones of neglect and how they figurate in the post-socialist transformation, how they were defined using the concepts of sexuality, race, and other categories. I would like to thank Kateřina Kolářová for her presentation. I'd like to say goodbye now, unless she has time for at least one question. We have one quick question. Does anyone have any question to Kateřina Kolářová's presentation? No.
Já bych se chtěl zeptat.
I would like to ask you, besides the dominant theory about the metaphor comparing the past with some inability, disability, or handicap. That's the dominating discourse. However, is an opposite discourse examined too that sees some negative points nowadays? I will answer in an indirect way. What I'm interested in defining the narrative that connected the socialism with a historic pathology that is not able to survive. And I was mainly concerned with this ideological function. And one of the ideological functions is formulating criticism of today. I did not go into the analysis in detail of the film Requiem pro Panenku by Philip Rench. The film interprets the fire in Měděnec as a history of a person who was in the psychiatric hospital that as a powerless human being, and it covered the possibility to talk about the symbolic violence of the neoliberal formation being formed at that time. Also, exhibitions of men in distress, Člověk tísní, shows this quite often. State socialism caused this, though, and it shows the symbolism of the past violence. However, nowadays we can also see such form of violence.